What would you do if your own family threw you into prison to steal everything you owned? Today, I'm sharing the incredible story of Adani Bakir, a young woman who went from being the most feared female prisoner to becoming the architect of the most spectacular revenge in history. Trust me, you won't believe how this story ends. But before we dive in, smash that like button and subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. Adani Bakir wasn't born into the wealthy Bakir family of Ikeja. She was adopted at age 7 after her parents died in a tragic accident on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. The Bakaris, Chief Emeka Bakir and his wife Ngozi, presented themselves as loving saviors, welcoming little Adani into their mansion with open arms. For 15 years, Adani believed she had found her forever family. She excelled in school, helped manage the family's textile business, and treated her adoptive sister Kimi like a blood sister. Chief Bakir often boasted to his friends about his brilliant adopted daughter who was destined to take over the family empire. But behind closed doors, jealousy was brewing. Kimi Bakir, the biological daughter, watched as her father praised Adani's intelligence and business acumen. She noticed how investors preferred dealing with Adani rather than herself. The green-eyed monster of envy grew larger each day, fed by her mother Ngozi's whispered complaints about the outsider who was stealing their family's spotlight. The breaking point came on Adani's 22nd birthday. Chief Bakir announced his decision to make Adani the primary heir to the Bakir textile empire, worth over 2 billion naira. She has the vision to take our business to new heights, he declared during the family meeting. That night, as Adani celebrated what she thought was the best day of her life, Kimi and Ngozi were plotting what would become the worst nightmare imaginable. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity and cruelty. Kimi had been secretly dating Tunde Augundaipe, a corrupt police officer with connections. Together with her mother, they crafted a story that would destroy Adani's life completely. It started with small things. Adani's behavior was suddenly being questioned. "She's been acting strange lately, talking to herself," Ngozi would whisper to neighbors. "We're so worried about her mental state." Then came the planted evidence. Old medications were placed in Adani's room. False medical records were created showing a history of psychological treatment that never happened. Most damaging of all, they staged an incident where Adani allegedly attacked a family friend during dinner, though Adani had been drugged and couldn't remember what happened. The final blow came when Chief Bakir was away on a business trip to Abuja. Kimi called the police, claiming Adani had threatened to kill the entire family and burn down their house. When the officers arrived, led by Tunde himself, they found evidence planted throughout Adani's room, threatening letters in her handwriting, weapons, and disturbing drawings that had been forged to perfection. "She's completely lost her mind," Kimi sobbed convincingly to the officers. "We've tried to help her, but she's become dangerous. We fear for our lives." Within hours, Adani was declared mentally unstable and sentenced to indefinite confinement at Oja Maximum Security Prison, in the psychiatric wing reserved for the most dangerous criminals. She tried to protest, to explain that she was being framed, but her words only seemed to confirm the diagnosis of paranoid delusions. As the prison gates slammed shut behind her, Adani realized the horrible truth. She had been completely betrayed by the only family she had ever known. Oja Prison was hell on earth. The psychiatric wing was overcrowded, understaffed, and filled with genuinely dangerous individuals. Adani was thrown into this chaos with no preparation, no protection, and no hope of getting out. The first few weeks were pure survival. Other inmates saw her as weak prey, a rich girl who had never faced real hardship. They were wrong. The betrayal had awakened something fierce within Adani, a strength she never knew existed. When 3 women cornered her in the bathroom during her second week, demanding she hand over her food rations, Adani fought back with a fury that surprised everyone, including herself. She didn't just defend herself, she dominated. Word spread quickly through the prison. The new girl was not to be underestimated. But Adani knew physical strength alone wouldn't ensure her survival. She began studying the prison's social structure, identifying the power players, understanding the unwritten rules that govern daily life. She helped inmates with their letters, mediated disputes, and slowly built a network of loyal followers. Within 6 months, Adunni had become the unofficial leader of the women's section. Inmates came to her with their problems, sought her permission for major decisions, and protected her with their lives. She had transformed from victim to queen, ruling with intelligence rather than brutality. But even as she adapted to prison life, the fire of revenge burned constantly in her heart. Every night, she planned her return to the outside world and the justice she would bring to the Bakr family. 3 years later, everything changed in a single day. Demila Ibrahim was Lagos State's most powerful businessman, a man whose influence reached into every corner of the society. His companies controlled everything from oil refineries to luxury hotels, and politicians from Abuja to Port Harcourt sought his approval before making major decisions. But Demila had a weakness: his beloved younger sister Folake, who had died in a car accident 5 years earlier. The loss had broken something fundamental in him, leaving him obsessed with finding a replacement for the sister who had been his closest friend and confidant. When Demila's private investigators brought him reports about Adunni, a young woman whose intelligence and leadership in prison reminded them of Folake, he became fixated. He was someone who had survived impossible circumstances, who had turned a hellish situation into a kingdom of her own making. On a rainy Thursday morning, Demila arrived at Oja prison with papers signed by the governor himself. Adunni Bakr was to be released into his personal custody for specialized psychiatric treatment at his private facility. As Adunni walked out of those prison gates, she had no idea she was entering a different kind of captivity, one that would be both her salvation and her new prison. Demila's mansion in Banana Island was more luxurious than anything Adunni had ever imagined. Servants catered to her every need, doctors examined her health, and stylists prepared new wardrobes. But beneath the luxury, she sensed the golden bars of her new cage. "You remind me of someone very precious to me," Demila told her during their first dinner together. "I want to take care of you, to give you everything you deserve." Adunni quickly realized that Demila saw her as a replacement for his dead sister. He was kind but controlling, generous but possessive. He monitored her conversations, chose her activities, and made it clear that while she was free from prison, she was not free from him. Initially, Adunni pretended the prison experience had left her mentally fragile, playing into Demila's protective instincts. But he was too intelligent to be completely fooled. "You're much stronger than you pretend," he told her one evening. "I know you're planning something. That's fine, as long as you remember who protects you now." It was a strange relationship, part guardian and ward, part captor and prisoner, part brother and sister. Demila gave Adunni access to education, legal documentation, and eventually enrolled her at the University of Lagos to study business administration. But he also isolated her, preventing friendships and monitoring her every move. For Adunni, this was both frustrating and strategic. While she chafed against Demila's control, she recognized the incredible opportunity he had given her. She was learning about high society, building knowledge about business and law, and most importantly, positioning herself to eventually confront the Bakr family. During her university years, Adunni transformed herself completely. She studied not just business but psychology, law, and strategic communication. She learned to move in elite circles, to speak the language of Lagos's powerful families, and to project confidence and authority. But she never forgot her true purpose. Every successful exam, every social connection, every skill acquired was a weapon being sharpened for the war she planned to wage against those who had destroyed her life. After 2 years of careful preparation, Adunni began her infiltration of Lagos high society. Using the identity and credentials Demila had provided, she started attending exclusive events, charity galas, and business conferences where she knew she would encounter the Bakr family. The first time she saw Kimi at a Fashion Week event in Victoria Island, the rush of anger was so intense she nearly broke character. Kimi looked exactly the same, spoiled, entitled, and utterly unaware that her victim had returned from the dead. Adunni approached carefully, introducing herself with her new identity as a successful young entrepreneur who had studied abroad. Kimi, always eager to network with successful people, welcomed her warmly without a hint of recognition. "You look familiar," Kimi said during their conversation. "Have we met before?" "I don't think so," Adani replied smoothly. "I would definitely remember meeting someone from the famous Bakir family." Over the following months, Adani systematically inserted herself into the Bakari's social circle. She attended their parties, invested in their business ventures, and slowly gained their trust. Chief Bakir, now older and grayer, welcomed her as a potential business partner. Ngozi treated her like a daughter, completely oblivious to the irony. But Adani wasn't content with mere social infiltration. She was gathering intelligence, documenting the family's illegal activities, and preparing evidence that would destroy them just as thoroughly as they had destroyed her. Through her connections and Damila's resources, Adani discovered the full extent of the Bakir family's corruption. They had been involved in money laundering, tax evasion, and fraudulent government contracts. More personally devastating, she learned that Mama Sidi, the elderly woman who had raised her before her adoption and had tried to visit her in prison, had died under suspicious circumstances after asking too many questions about Adani's whereabouts. The revelation about Mama Sidi's death was the final catalyst. The woman who had loved Adani like a grandmother had been silenced because she refused to believe the lies about Adani's mental illness. This was more than betrayal, it was murder. Adani's revenge campaign began subtly but devastatingly. Using her business connections and inside knowledge, she started targeting the Bakir family's financial empire. She convinced key investors to withdraw their support, leaked information about illegal contracts to investigative journalists, and systematically dismantled their reputation in Lagos business circles. The Bakaris initially thought they were experiencing a streak of bad luck. Contracts fell through, partners withdrew, and their previously sterling reputation began to tarnish. They never suspected that their misfortunes were being orchestrated by someone they considered a trusted friend. As their empire crumbled, Adani moved to the next phase of her plan. At a high-profile charity event attended by Lagos's elite, she arranged for a public confrontation that would expose the truth about her identity and their crimes. Standing at the podium where she was supposed to give a speech about successful young entrepreneurs, Adani instead told her story. She revealed her true identity, explained how the Bakir family had framed her and stolen her inheritance, and presented evidence of their ongoing criminal activities. The audience was stunned. Here was a woman they had come to respect and admire, revealing herself as the victim of one of Lagos's most prominent families. The story spread like wildfire across social media, news outlets, and gossip networks. But Adani wasn't finished. She had arranged for law enforcement officials to be present at the event, armed with warrants and evidence that would ensure the Bakaris faced legal consequences for their actions. Chief Bakir tried to deny everything, claiming Adani was still mentally ill and fabricating stories. But the evidence was overwhelming: financial records, testimony from former employees, and documentation of the fraudulent psychiatric evaluation that had sent Adani to prison. In the most dramatic moment of the evening, Adani confronted Kimi directly. "Do you remember what you told me the night before you had me arrested?" she asked in front of the assembled crowd. "You said I would never belong to your family, that I was just a charity case who had forgotten her place. Well, sister, I found my place, and it's watching your world burn down around you." Kimi's composure finally cracked. Faced with undeniable evidence and public humiliation, she broke down and confessed to her role in framing Adani. The confession was recorded and would later become key evidence in the criminal proceedings. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Chief Bakir and Ngozi were arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to wrongful imprisonment. Kimi was charged with perjury and conspiracy. Their assets were frozen, their business licenses revoked, and their social standing completely destroyed. But for Adani, the legal victory was only part of her satisfaction. She had proven that the powerless could become powerful, that the discarded could rebuild themselves into forces of nature. However, her triumph came with a price. Demilla had watched her revenge campaign with a mixture of pride and possessiveness. He had provided her with the tools for her victory, but he expected her to remain under his control afterward. "You've had your revenge," he told her after the Bakari's arrest. "Now you can focus on building a life with me, as part of my family." But Adani had tasted true freedom and refused to trade one cage for another, even a golden one. "You saved me," she told Demilla. "You gave me the opportunity to reclaim my life, and I'll always be grateful. But I won't be your replacement sister or your controlled ward. I'm my own person now." The final confrontation with Demilla was as intense as her battle with the Bakaris, but different in nature. This was not about revenge, but about establishing her independence from someone who had both helped and restricted her. Demilla's response was characteristic. He tried to maintain control through a mixture of threats and promises. But Adani had learned too much about power dynamics during her years in prison and high society. She had documented evidence of some of Demilla's own questionable business practices, giving her leverage in their negotiation. In the end, they reached an understanding. Demilla would respect her independence and allow her to build her own life, while Adani would maintain discretion about his personal obsessions and business methods. It was not friendship, but it was a form of mutual respect born from their strange relationship. 6 months after the Bakari's downfall, Adani stood in the office of her new consulting firm, helping other victims of powerful families seek justice through legal and strategic means. She had reclaimed not just her name and inheritance, but her purpose in life. The girl who had been thrown away like garbage had become one of Lagos's most respected advocates for justice. The prisoner who had ruled through intelligence and strength had become a businesswoman who wielded power responsibly. But perhaps most importantly, Adani had proven that your circumstances don't define your destiny. Whether you're abandoned, betrayed, imprisoned, or controlled, you always have the power to rewrite your story if you're willing to fight for it. The Bakar family name, once synonymous with success in Lagos, became a cautionary tale about the consequences of greed and betrayal. Chief Bakar died in prison, his health broken by the stress of his legal troubles. Ngozi was released after serving 2 years but lived in poverty and obscurity. Kimi served her sentence and emerged a broken woman, working as a shop assistant in a small market, a far cry from the entitled era she had once been. Meanwhile, Mama Sidi's memory was honored with a foundation that provided legal aid to victims of family betrayal and wrongful imprisonment. It was Adani's way of ensuring that the woman who had loved her unconditionally would never be forgotten. As for Adani herself, she had learned that true power isn't about dominating others, it's about refusing to be dominated. She had gone from victim to victor not through becoming like her oppressors, but by becoming someone entirely new, a woman who used her strength to protect rather than destroy, who wielded her intelligence to seek justice rather than mere revenge. Standing in her office overlooking Lagos Island, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Adani reflected on her incredible journey. From an abandoned child to an adopted daughter, from a framed innocent to a feared prisoner, from a controlled ward to an independent woman, each phase had taught her something crucial about survival, strength, and the importance of never giving up on yourself. The story of Adani Bakar became legendary, a reminder that no matter how powerful your enemies, no matter how hopeless your situation seems, there's always a way to fight back if you're smart enough, strong enough, and determined enough to never accept defeat. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what part of Adani's journey inspired you the most. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more amazing stories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are stronger than their circumstances. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over until you decide it is. Keep fighting, keep growing, and never let anyone convince you that you're powerless. See you in the next video.